The Apache warrior stood motionless among the pines, watching the woman stir a nearly dead fire. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, and beside her, a once proud horse lay thin and weak. Neither had eaten in days. The woman's fingers trembled as she stroked her sleeping child's hair, her eyes reflecting the stubborn pride of someone who would rather die than ask for help. Silent as shadow, the warrior disappeared into the darkness. Before dawn, he returned, leaving dried meat, water, and blankets at the edge of her camp. He vanished before she woke, but something in her desperate dignity had stirred memories he'd buried long ago. What would make a feared Apache warrior risk everything for a settler woman the territory had abandoned? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Running Wolf moved like a ghost through the morning mist, his weathered face revealing little of the thoughts churning beneath. At 45, the lines etched around his eyes told stories of hardship few men could comprehend. He knelt beside a small stream, splashing cold water against his face before checking the medicine pouch that hung faithfully around his neck, a reminder of teachings from elders long gone. The pouch contained herbs passed down through generations of Apache healers. His grandmother had taught him their properties before the raid that left him alone at 12. Sage for purification, bearberry for strength, cedar to ward off sickness. The knowledge remained one of the few connections to his heritage that soldiers couldn't burn away. Copper Creek settlers called him the Phantom Apache, a solitary figure glimpsed at territory edges. Some claimed he was a scout for war parties that never came. Others whispered he was a ghost, the last survivor of a band slaughtered in the mountains. The rumors suited Running Wolf. Fear kept people away, and solitude had become his closest companion. His daily routine rarely varied. Hunt at dawn, check trap lines by midday, gather plants when the sun hung highest. The monotony brought comfort after years of existing between two worlds, rejected by tribes who viewed him as tainted by white ways, hunted by settlers who saw only a savage in his Apache features. He hadn't planned to approach the settler camp. Running Wolf had learned to avoid white travelers, their fear of Indians too often turning deadly. But something in the woman's determination as she fed twigs to a dying fire had stopped him. The child curled against her side, too thin. The horse, once strong, now barely standing. They wouldn't survive another week alone. Running Wolf touched the small carved stone in his pouch, the last gift from his wife before soldiers took her and their son 12 winters ago. He'd found their bodies among the burned teepees, their hands reaching for each other even in death. The woman at the campfire had that same fierce protection in her eyes when she held her child. A mother wolf with one cub, teeth bared against a world determined to take what little remained. Running Wolf recognized the look. He'd worn it himself until there was nothing left to protect. The meat and water he'd left would sustain them another day, perhaps two. Not enough. Winter approached with heavy clouds building over mountain peaks. The woman's threadbare coat and the child's worn shoes wouldn't keep death away when snow fell. Running Wolf returned to his small cabin hidden in a valley few whites had discovered. The stone walls and timber roof blended Apache practicality with settler construction. Inside, dried herbs hung from ceiling beams above a central fire pit. Animal hides covered the packed earth floor. A carved wooden table stood against one wall, a skill learned from a trapper who traded knowledge for furs before consumption took him 3 winters past. As evening approached, Running Wolf prepared for another visit to the camp. This time he packed more supplies, dried venison, a water skin, extra blankets. He hesitated before adding a small knife with an antler handle. The woman might fear him, but she would need protection. He waited until darkness, wondering at his own actions. Years of isolation had taught Running Wolf that involvement brought pain. Yet something pulled him toward the struggling pair. Perhaps the memory of another mother and child he couldn't save. Or perhaps the recognition that loneliness had hollowed him like bark beetles through dead pine. Either way, Running Wolf knew his solitary existence had shifted the moment he'd spotted them. The territory's bitter history between Apache and settler hung between them like a blade, but beneath it lay a simpler truth. Without help, they would die. And something in Running Wolf, some part he thought long dead, couldn't bear to watch it happen. Sarah Bennett woke with a start, her hand instinctively reaching for the small body beside her. Finding Emma still asleep, her breathing shallow but steady, Sarah relaxed slightly. The morning chill bit through their threadbare blanket, another reminder of how unprepared they were for the approaching winter. Her gaze fell on the items at the edge of their camp. Dried meat, a water skin, 2 thick wool blankets. They hadn't been there when she'd finally succumbed to exhaustion. Sarah scanned the tree line, searching for whoever had left these life-saving supplies, but saw only swaying pines and the endless Montana sky. "Mama!" Emma's voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. At 8 years old, her daughter spoke rarely since the fever that had taken her father last spring. The same fever that had forced them from their homestead when neighbors feared contagion. Despite Sarah's protests that the danger had passed. "I'm here, sweet one." Sarah stroked Emma's tangled blonde hair. "Look what we have for breakfast." Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the meat. She clutched the worn rag doll, the only possession Sarah had managed to grab when they fled, tighter to her chest. "Where did it come from?" Emma asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Someone kind," Sarah answered, though kindness had been scarce during their journey west. The homestead they'd been promised in her cousin's letters had already been claimed when they arrived. Their money had dwindled with each passing day at the boarding house until the proprietor had made suggestions that sent Sarah fleeing with Emma in the night, their horse carrying what little remained of their life. They'd headed south, hoping to reach another settlement before winter. But the horse had weakened, slowing their progress. Then came the storm 3 days ago that had disoriented Sarah completely, leaving them lost in unfamiliar territory. Sarah examined the meat cautiously before offering a small piece to Emma. Her farming background in Ohio hadn't prepared her for identifying safe wild foods, but hunger overrode caution. The meat was properly dried and smelled clean. Emma devoured her portion while Sarah rationed her own, her maternal instinct to ensure her child ate first overwhelming her own hunger. As Emma ate, Sarah studied the blankets. Finely woven wool with geometric patterns, Indian work, unmistakably. A chill that had nothing to do with the morning air ran through her. They were in Apache territory, according to the last trader they'd encountered. He'd warned her to turn back, spinning tales of ruthless warriors who collected scalps of settlers who ventured too far from established towns. Sarah had dismissed his warnings as the exaggerated stories men often told to frighten women. Now, staring at the blankets, she wondered, why would an Apache leave supplies rather than attack? Was it a trap to gain their trust? Emma had finished her meat and was examining one of the blankets, her small fingers tracing the patterns with unusual interest. Sarah hadn't seen her daughter this engaged with anything since Thomas died. "Pretty?" Emma whispered, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The girl's cheeks had more color than yesterday, the food already working its magic. Sarah made her decision. Trap or not, they needed these supplies to survive. She would accept this strange gift but remain vigilant. If Indians wanted to attack, they could have done so while she slept. There must be another explanation. She turned her attention to their weakened horse. The animal lay on its side, ribs protruding sharply under its dull coat. Sarah offered it water from the skin, which it drank greedily. Without the horse, their chances diminished further. They couldn't outrun danger or carry what few possessions remained. Sarah unfolded the second blanket and settled it over Emma. "Rest a bit more while I tend to the fire." As she gathered what meager twigs she could find, Sarah fought the despair threatening to overwhelm her. She had promised Thomas on his deathbed that she would keep their daughter safe, would build the life they had dreamed of together. Each day that promise became harder to keep. The food and blankets bought them time, nothing more. Winter in these mountains would claim them without shelter, without more provisions than a single package of dried meat. Sarah looked at Emma, now sleeping peacefully under the new blanket, her rag doll clutched to her chest. For her daughter's sake, she would find a way forward, even if it meant accepting help from unknown hands. Copper Creek had grown from mining camp to proper town in less than 5 years, its buildings standing as monuments to American determination or invasion, depending on who told the story. The newly constructed courthouse dominated the main street, its wooden steps already worn from the boots of miners, merchants, and settlers seeking justice according to white man's law. Inside his office, Marshal Wade Thornton polished his badge with methodical precision. At 52, his once auburn hair had faded to steel gray, matching the coldness in his eyes. 20 years of frontier law enforcement had hardened him like the iron from which the town derived its name. Marshal got reports of Apache signs near Miller's Creek. Deputy Collins announced from the doorway. Young and eager, Collins had arrived from Philadelphia with notions of frontier adventure that Thornton found both useful and contemptible. "Hunting party?" Thornton asked without looking up. "Don't think so. Single tracks. Might be that renegade folks whisper about." Thornton's jaw tightened. The renegade had been a thorn in his side for years. An Apache who refused to die or be driven away like the others. A reminder of unfinished business. "Send Mason and Willard to check it out," Thornton ordered. "And remind folks to keep their rifles loaded." After Collins left, Thornton unfolded a worn map from his desk drawer. The edges were charred, salvaged from a fire that had claimed a military outpost 10 years prior. He traced a finger over the territory west of town, where scattered X marks indicated Apache camps he'd helped clear. One mark near Eagle Mountain remained uncrossed. The last band, led by Chief Gray Wolf, had been eliminated in the campaign of '61. All except one warrior who'd escaped. Thornton had tracked him for months before reluctantly accepting that the man had either died in the wilderness or fled to Mexico. Yet rumors persisted of a solitary Apache living in the mountains. Watching, waiting. Thornton had dismissed these stories as superstitious nonsense. But lately, the reports had increased. Livestock found slaughtered in Apache style. Tracks discovered near outlying farms. A hunter claiming he'd glimpsed a figure moving through trees at dusk, like a ghost but flesh. The marshal folded the map and tucked it away. The Apache problem should have been solved years ago. Governor Wilson had been clear. The territory would not attract investment while savages threatened settlers' safety. Thornton had carried out that policy with efficiency that earned him both promotion and nightmares. He still remembered the screams from the camp at Eagle Mountain. The way the Indian children had hidden behind their mothers. The chief's wife who'd cursed him in broken English before a lieutenant's bullet silenced her. Thornton had told his men it was necessary. These people had refused reservation life and chosen war instead. What troubled his sleep wasn't the dead but the one who escaped. The warrior who'd fought with unusual skill, wielding both traditional weapons and a cavalry pistol. Who'd stared at Thornton with such hatred before disappearing into the forest that the marshal sometimes felt those eyes watching him still. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Abernathy from the general store entered without waiting for permission, her perpetual frown deepening the lines around her mouth. "Marshal, that Gardner woman passed through last week headed south. Had a sickly child with her," she reported. "Johnson at the livery said her horse wouldn't last another 20 miles. They might be in trouble." "And?" Thornton responded coldly. "People make foolish choices daily, Mrs. Abernathy. The territory doesn't coddle fools." "She had a child, Marshal," Mrs. Abernathy persisted. "A little girl. And they were heading right toward Apache country." Thornton sighed, knowing the woman wouldn't leave without his assurance. "I'll send Collins to check the south road." Satisfied? After Mrs. Abernathy departed, Thornton stared through the window at the bustling town. His town secured through blood and fire. He'd buried too many settlers killed by Apache raids to feel sympathy for a woman foolish enough to travel those mountains alone. If she and her child had met the fate he suspected, they'd be two more reasons to finally hunt down the last Apache. The territory's future demanded completion of what he'd started at Eagle Mountain, for progress, for civilization, for peace in his own mind. Sarah woke to the distinctive sound of a twig snapping. Her eyes flew open, heart hammering against her ribs. Dawn had barely broken, the forest still shrouded in half-light. Emma slept beside her, finally peaceful after a night of coughing. A figure stood at the edge of their camp. Sarah reached for the small knife hidden beneath her blanket, her fingers trembling. The silhouette remained motionless. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, watching them with unnerving stillness. An Indian. There was no mistaking the long black hair, the distinctive outline of his clothing. "I mean no harm." His voice was deep, the English accented but clear. He raised empty hands slowly. "Your child is sick. Horse is dying." Sarah tightened her grip on the knife, positioning herself between the stranger and Emma. "What do you want?" Instead of answering, he placed something on the ground between them. An eagle feather, its dark tip dipped in red ochre. Sarah had heard stories of such tokens, offered as signs of protection, though she dismissed them as frontier myths. "I left meat. Blankets." He gestured toward their supplies. "That was you." Sarah kept her voice steady despite her fear. "Why?" He seemed to consider the question, as if the answer wasn't simple. "Winter comes. You will die here." His bluntness startled her. He wasn't wrong. Their situation was dire. The horse had grown weaker overnight, and Emma's cough worried her. They had perhaps 3 days of meat left from his gift. After that, there is shelter. He pointed west, toward the mountains. "Safe place. Food. Medicine for child." "Why would you help us?" Sarah asked, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Again that long pause. "Does it matter?" Emma stirred then, her small face appearing from beneath the blanket. She showed no fear at the sight of the stranger, only curiosity. "You brought the pretty blanket," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. The man's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He knelt, bringing himself closer to Emma's eye level, though still keeping a respectful distance. "Yes." He reached into a leather pouch at his waist and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. "For fever." He placed it beside the eagle feather. "Brew like tea." Sarah studied him. Everything she'd been taught warned against trusting an Apache. Yet this man had already helped them once, when he could have easily attacked them at their most vulnerable. "I am called Running Wolf," he offered, as if sensing her internal struggle. "Sarah Bennett," she replied cautiously. "My daughter, Emma." Emma surprised her by offering a small wave, which Running Wolf acknowledged with a slight nod. "Storm comes." He gestured toward dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "Your horse cannot travel far. My cabin, 2 hours walking." The mention of a cabin intrigued Sarah. Not a teepee or wickiup, but a cabin. Another piece that didn't fit the stories she'd heard about the Apache. "Come with me." The words were not a command but an invitation, quietly spoken yet carrying the weight of their survival. Sarah looked at their meager camp, the dying fire, the weakened horse, their dwindling supplies. Emma's cough had worsened overnight, and the gathering clouds promised bitter cold. Pride had sustained her this far, but pride wouldn't keep her daughter alive. "We need to gather our things," Sarah finally said, making her decision. Running Wolf nodded once. "I will help with horse." As he moved to examine the animal, Sarah noticed something else. A worn cavalry-issue knife sheath at his belt, incongruous with his otherwise traditional appearance. Another mystery about this man who defied her expectations. Emma tugged at her sleeve. "Can we trust him, Mama?" Sarah watched as Running Wolf gently stroked the horse's neck, murmuring words in his native tongue. The animal's ears flickered forward, responding to his touch when it had barely acknowledged Sarah's attentions that morning. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but I think we must." The approaching storm painted the sky charcoal gray, and with it came the certainty that this moment, this decision, would forever divide her life into before and after. Running Wolf worked with methodical efficiency, his hands crafting a simple travois while Sarah gathered their few possessions. He'd fashioned the horse-dragging frame from 2 sturdy pine saplings and crosspieces of stripped branches, lashing everything together with sinew from his pouch. "Horse too weak to carry," he explained, securing the last binding. "But can pull. Save strength." Sarah nodded, impressed by the practical solution. The travois would allow their weakened mare to transport their belongings without bearing weight on her back. She watched as Running Wolf spoke softly to the animal in Apache, his hand steady on its neck. The horse's eyes, dull with exhaustion, seemed to brighten slightly at his touch. "You have a way with her," Sarah observed. "Horse understands respect," he replied simply. "Knows when someone listens." Emma stood nearby, clutching her rag doll while watching Running Wolf with undisguised fascination. When he caught her staring, he didn't smile exactly, but his stern expression softened. "You help?" he asked her, holding out a piece of rope. Emma looked to Sarah for permission before approaching cautiously. Running Wolf showed her how to tie a simple knot, his large hands dwarfing her small ones. Sarah noticed how he adjusted his instructions when Emma struggled, demonstrating again with infinite patience. It was the most engaged she'd seen her daughter since Thomas's death. Once the travois was secured, Running Wolf helped arrange their belongings on the frame. He examined the worn map Sarah had kept folded in her pocket, a rough sketch of the territory her cousin had sent months earlier. The edges were charred, damaged in the same fire that had forced them from their temporary shelter weeks ago. "This place no good," he said, pointing to their intended destination. "Dry creek. No settlement." Sarah's heart sank. "But my cousin wrote." "Man who wrote this dead or lied." Running Wolf's bluntness carried no cruelty, just certainty. The knowledge should have devastated her, but Sarah was too exhausted for fresh grief. Another hope extinguished, another door closed. They set off as the first snowflakes began to fall, Running Wolf leading, Sarah guiding the horse, and Emma walking between them. The travois slid over the ground with surprising ease, the mare seeming to draw strength from having a clear purpose. The forest thickened as they traveled, pine and spruce creating a canopy that shielded them partially from the increasing snowfall. Running Wolf moved with silent confidence, occasionally stopping to help Emma over a fallen log or to check the horse's progress. "How much farther?" Sarah asked, after they'd been walking for what felt like hours. Emma had begun to tire, her small steps faltering. Instead of answering, Running Wolf stopped and knelt beside Emma. "Legs tired." When Emma nodded, he turned and offered his back. After a hesitant glance at Sarah, Emma climbed on, her arms around his neck. He rose effortlessly, securing her with one arm while continuing to guide them forward. The gesture surprised Sarah. This mixture of gentleness and strength from a man the settlers painted as savage. She'd been raised on stories of Apache brutality, taught to fear the very sight of a warrior like Running Wolf. Yet here he was, carrying her daughter with the same care Thomas once had. The snow fell heavier, and the wind picked up, cutting through Sarah's inadequate coat. She shivered, fighting to keep moving forward. Running Wolf noticed immediately. "Not far now," he assured her, reaching into his pack one-handed while still carrying Emma. He extracted another blanket, this one smaller but lined with rabbit fur. "Put on shoulders." The warmth was immediate and welcome. Sarah pulled it tighter around herself, wondering at the strange twist of fate that had delivered them into the care of a man she'd been taught to fear. They crested a small rise, and Running Wolf paused, allowing Sarah to catch up. Through the curtain of snow, She could just make out a small valley below, sheltered by rock formations on three sides. In its center stood a structure, not the crude shelter she'd expected, but a proper cabin with stone walls and a chimney from which a thin line of smoke rose. "My home," Running Wolf said simply. "Safe now." The stone cabin stood as a testament to two worlds merged. Sarah studied it with undisguised surprise as they approached. The foundation and lower walls were carefully stacked river stone, while the upper portion combined traditional log construction with what appeared to be Apache building techniques. A small corral stood empty beside it, and a lean-to shelter protected stacked firewood from the intensifying snow. "You built this yourself?" Sarah asked as Running Wolf led them to the door. He nodded. 7 winters now. Inside, the cabin revealed even more unexpected complexity. A central fire pit occupied the middle of the single room, Apache style, with a clever chimney system that drew smoke upward. Yet around it stood furnishings a settler would recognize: a handcrafted table and chairs, a bed frame with a stuffed mattress, shelves holding an assortment of tools, books, and containers. Emma slid from Running Wolf's back, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. The exhaustion of their journey seemed momentarily forgotten as she explored the new space, curiosity overcoming her usual reticence. "Horse first," Running Wolf said, gesturing for Sarah to wait inside. "Then fire," while he tended to the mare, securing her in the lean-to with fresh hay that appeared from a hidden storage space. Sarah examined their temporary sanctuary. Dried herbs hung from the rafters. Some she recognized from her own gardening, others foreign to her. Beautifully tanned hides covered portions of the floor. A shelf held unexpected treasures: 3 leather-bound books, a carved wooden box, a tarnished silver mirror. Most surprising were the windows, actual glass panes, small but allowing light while keeping out the cold. Such luxury was rare even in established settlements. Emma gravitated toward a corner where several wooden carvings stood, animals rendered with remarkable detail. She reached out tentatively to touch a miniature horse. "You may," Sarah said softly, guessing her daughter's unasked question. Running Wolf returned, bringing with him a blast of cold air and snowflakes that melted instantly in the relative warmth. He moved to the fire pit where banked coals still glowed, adding kindling and larger wood with practiced ease. Within moments, flames danced upward, casting flickering light throughout the cabin. "Your home is unexpected," Sarah said, struggling to reconcile this place with her preconceptions. Running Wolf glanced at her, something almost like amusement in his eyes. "What did you expect? Teepee? Scalps on wall?" The directness of his question made Sarah flush. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." He waved away her apology. "Many worlds in one man. Apache ways. White man's tools." He gestured around the cabin. "Both useful." He moved to a corner where a metal pot hung from a hook. "Hungry." Only then did Sarah realize how famished they were. Their meager breakfast seemed ages ago. Emma's small stomach growled audibly, drawing a rare sound from Running Wolf, something close to a chuckle. "Little bear hungry," he observed, the nickname emerging so naturally that even Emma smiled. While he prepared a simple stew, adding dried meat and preserved vegetables to water, Sarah helped Emma settle on a buffalo hide near the fire. The child's eyelids drooped almost immediately, the warmth and safety overwhelming after days of exposure and fear. "She needs medicine," Sarah said, watching Emma's chest rise and fall with slightly labored breathing. Running Wolf nodded, already reaching for his medicine pouch. He selected several dried herbs, crushing them between his fingers before adding them to a small clay cup with hot water. "When cool enough," he instructed, setting it near the fire to steep. "Good for cough." The domestic normalcy of the scene struck Sarah with unexpected force. This morning they had been strangers, enemies, according to everything she'd been taught. Now they moved around each other in this small space, preparing food and medicine, establishing a tentative routine born of necessity. As darkness fell outside and the snow continued its silent accumulation, Sarah found herself studying their host. Running Wolf moved with quiet efficiency, his scarred hands revealing a life of hard work and likely violence. Yet those same hands had gently carried her daughter, had crafted delicate wooden animals, had prepared medicine with healer's precision. "Why do you live alone?" she finally asked. "Away from your people?" Running Wolf continued stirring the pot, his expression unreadable. "My people are gone," he said after a long silence. "This valley is my home now." The simplicity of his answer contained depths of loss Sarah recognized all too well. Morning arrived with shafts of pale sunlight filtering through the glass windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Sarah woke to find Emma's place beside her empty. Momentary panic seized her until she heard something she hadn't heard in months, her daughter's soft laughter. In the corner by the wooden carvings, Emma sat cross-legged on a hide, watching intently as Running Wolf's knife shaped a small piece of pine. Shavings curled around his fingers as a form gradually emerged. A rabbit, ears alert, ready to spring. "See how grain flows?" he was explaining quietly. "Wood tells you what it wants to be." Emma nodded with unusual animation. "Could I try sometime?" When hands stronger, Running Wolf promised. "Start with soft wood. Pine. Cedar." He noticed Sarah watching and nodded in acknowledgement. Little Bear slept well. Medicine helped. Indeed, Emma's breathing sounded clearer. The worrisome rattle in her chest diminished. The herbal tea had worked more effectively than the expensive medicine Sarah had purchased in the last town. After a breakfast of cornmeal porridge sweetened with dried berries, Running Wolf left to check his trap lines. Sarah used the opportunity to properly explore the cabin, hoping to better understand the enigmatic man who had saved them. Emma followed her, clutching the carved rabbit Running Wolf had given her before departing. "He makes them all," she told Sarah, gesturing toward the collection of wooden animals. "He said he'll teach me when I'm stronger." Sarah examined the carvings more closely: deer, bear, eagle, wolf, each rendered with remarkable attention to detail. "They're beautiful," she agreed, wondering about the hours of solitude they represented. A wooden chest beneath the window caught her attention. Unlike the other furnishings, this appeared to be of military origin, the brass fittings tarnished but still bearing the faint imprint of a government seal. Her conscience warred briefly with curiosity before the latter one. She opened it carefully. Inside lay objects that told conflicting stories. A military-issue compass, a worn Bible with Spanish inscriptions, a woman's beaded necklace, Apache in design, a tattered photograph showing a younger Running Wolf standing beside a white man in prospector's clothes, both smiling slightly at the camera. And beneath these, wrapped in soft deerskin, a cavalry officer's pistol. "Mama, should you be looking at his things?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with worry. Sarah closed the chest quickly, guilt washing over her. "You're right, that wasn't proper." She moved to the cabin's single bookshelf, where 3 volumes stood. One was a practical guide to frontier medicine, another a worn copy of Thoreau's Walden, and the third a surveyor's manual. All contained neat annotations in the margins, some in English, others in what she assumed was Apache. "He can read," Sarah murmured, surprised again by this man who defied categorization. "Of course he can read," Emma replied with the simple logic of children. "He's smart." When Running Wolf returned, he carried 2 rabbits and a string of fish. Emma ran to meet him, excited to show him how she'd arranged his wooden animals in a circle for a meeting. Rather than dismissing her childish play, he knelt to examine her work, asking questions about what each animal might be saying. Sarah watched their interaction, something warm and unexpected uncurling in her chest. It had been so long since Emma had engaged so freely with anyone. Thomas's death had locked her daughter behind walls of silence that Sarah had begun to fear were permanent. "Thank you," she said later, as they prepared the rabbits together, "for being kind to her." Running Wolf looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. "Children see truth. No need for histories between peoples." "Is that why you helped us?" Sarah asked. "To escape history?" His hands stilled momentarily. "No escape from history. It walks with us." He resumed his work, but something in his expression had shifted. "Sometimes new story can begin, if we choose." That evening, they shared the first real meal they'd had in weeks. Running Wolf had roasted the rabbits with herbs that filled the cabin with savory aromas. He'd also produced dried corn and beans from his stores, creating a hearty stew. As they ate, Emma asked about the wooden animals, and Running Wolf began telling traditional Apache stories about each creature. His voice changed when he spoke these tales, becoming almost melodic, preserving the rhythms of oral tradition. Sarah listened, mesmerized not just by the stories but by the transformation in her daughter, who leaned forward eagerly, asking questions, her eyes bright with engagement. For the first time since losing Thomas, Sarah allowed herself to feel something dangerous: hope. A week passed in the sheltered valley, marked by strengthening bodies and cautious trust. The mare, whom Emma had named Star for the white marking on her forehead, improved daily under Running Wolf's care. Her ribs no longer protruded so sharply, and her coat regained some of its luster. Like her owners, the horse seemed to thrive in this unexpected sanctuary. Running Wolf had brought Sarah's damaged saddle into the cabin, where he worked on it each evening, his strong fingers replacing broken stitching and reinforcing weakened leather. The mended saddle sat as a testament to his belief that broken things could be made useful again. "Why fix it?" Sarah asked one evening as she helped him apply tallow to condition the leather. "We have nowhere to go." Running Wolf's hands never paused in their methodical work. "Winter will end. You will choose your path then." The reminder of their temporary arrangement hung between them. Sarah had avoided thinking beyond day-to-day survival, but the truth remained: this arrangement couldn't last forever. "Teach me," she said suddenly, gesturing to the herbs hanging from the rafters. "If we're to survive on our own when spring comes, I should learn what you know." Running Wolf studied her for a moment, then nodded. The next morning, despite fresh snow on the ground, he took her to sheltered spots where winter plants could still be harvested. Pine needles rich in healing properties, bark that could ease pain, roots that provided nourishment when cooked properly. "Your people know these things too," he observed as she carefully collected pine resin under his guidance. "Old knowledge. Women like you once passed it down." "My grandmother knew plants," Sarah admitted, "but my mother thought such knowledge old-fashioned. She wanted me to be a modern woman." Running Wolf made a sound that might have been amusement. "Modern woman starves when town is far away." His bluntness startled a laugh from Sarah, her first since Thomas died. The sound seemed to surprise them both. While they worked together outdoors, Emma's health continued to improve. The child spent hours arranging Running Wolf's carved animals, creating elaborate stories about their adventures. When he carved a small girl figure to join them, Emma's delight had brought an almost smile to the warrior's stoic face. That afternoon, as Sarah and Running Wolf returned with their gathered plants, a sound stopped them at the edge of the clearing: voices, male and unfamiliar, approaching from the east. Running Wolf motioned for silence, guiding Sarah quickly to the cabin. Inside, he pressed a finger to his lips, alerting Emma to be quiet before retrieving his rifle from beside the door. "Hunters," he whispered. "Stay inside." Through the window, Sarah watched him conceal himself among the trees, becoming nearly invisible despite the snow. Minutes later, two white men emerged at the forest edge, rifles slung over their shoulders. "Told you I saw smoke," the taller one said, pointing toward the cabin's chimney. "Someone's living out here." The second man studied the ground. Horse tracks. Recent. Apache don't keep horses in winter, the first replied, advancing cautiously. Might be that trapper Matthews mentioned. Sarah's heart pounded as they approached the cabin. Emma pressed against her, sensing the tension. The men were just steps from the door when Running Wolf emerged from the trees behind them. Lost your way. His voice, deliberately casual, caused both men to spin, raising their rifles instinctively. Jesus! The shorter man exclaimed. Where'd you come from? Running Wolf ignored the question. Hunting's better north of the ridge. Deer moving that way after last storm. The men exchanged glances, taking in Running Wolf's appearance with obvious suspicion. His clothing combined buckskins with settler garments, his heritage unmistakable in his features. You live here? The taller one asked, gesturing toward the cabin. Running Wolf nodded once. 5 years now. Alone. The shorter man's eyes narrowed. Before Running Wolf could answer, a gust of wind caught the cabin door, pushing it slightly ajar. The movement drew the hunter's attention immediately. Got company? The taller man took a step toward the door. Running Wolf shifted, blocking his path without appearing threatening. My business. The tension stretched, each man calculating risk. Finally, the shorter hunter tugged his companion's sleeve. Come on, Jackson. Lights fading. Need to get back before dark. Reluctantly, Jackson backed away. Copper Creek's organizing a winter hunt next week. Might swing by to trade if we're nearby. Only after they disappeared into the forest did Running Wolf lower his guard. Inside the cabin, he moved with unusual urgency, gathering essential supplies. They will talk in town, he explained. Questions will come. We must prepare. Sarah understood the implication immediately. A lone Apache living with a white woman and child would draw attention they couldn't afford. What do we do? She asked, already gathering Emma's few belongings. Running Wolf's expression was grim. Make this place harder to find, and be ready to leave if necessary. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah sat with Running Wolf by the fire, tension still lingering from the hunter's visit. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, carrying the promise of more snow. Running Wolf had spent hours concealing the obvious paths to the cabin, covering tracks, and rearranging branches to make the approach less visible. Will they come back? Sarah asked, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Emma. Perhaps. Running Wolf added another log to the fire. Men talk. Stories grow. Sarah touched the silver locket at her throat, a habitual gesture when she felt unsettled. Running Wolf noticed, his dark eyes questioning. It was Thomas's gift when Emma was born, she explained, opening the small silver oval to reveal a miniature portrait of a smiling man with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. My husband. Running Wolf studied the image respectfully. He had good face, honest eyes. He was, Sarah agreed, surprising herself by continuing. A carpenter by trade. We married young in Ohio. His dream was to build our own home in the West. The words came easier than expected, as if the weeks of shared survival had earned Running Wolf the right to her history. When land opened in Montana Territory, we sold everything to make the journey. Thomas said opportunity was waiting for anyone willing to work. A bitter smile crossed her face. He didn't account for fever taking him before we even reached our homestead. Running Wolf's expression remained steady, offering silent witness to her pain. It started with a cough after crossing the Snake River. By the time we reached the next settlement, he couldn't stand. The doctor took our last money and gave us nothing but false hope. Sarah closed the locket with a gentle click. He died holding my hand, making me promise to continue west, to build the life he'd envisioned for Emma. So you came here, Running Wolf observed. Alone. Following a map and a promise from a cousin I barely knew. Sarah laughed without humor. When we reached Copper Creek, We learned he'd been killed in a mining accident months earlier. His claim reverted to the company. We had nowhere to go. She described the dwindling options, the increasingly inappropriate offers from men in town, her decision to press on rather than subject Emma to such an environment. I thought I could find another settlement before winter, she finished. I was a fool. Not fool, Running Wolf countered. Mother protecting child. Brave. His simple validation loosened something tight in Sarah's chest. She had carried her failures silently for so long, the weight of them threatening to crush her spirit. Running Wolf was silent for a long moment, then spoke with careful precision. My wife was called Morning Star. My son, Little Fox. He touched his medicine pouch. Gone 10 winters now. Sarah sensed the magnitude of this sharing. These names he perhaps hadn't spoken aloud in years. What happened? She asked gently. Running Wolf's face hardened. Soldiers, said our band raided cattle. Not true. His hands tightened around the stick he'd been carving. Came at dawn. No warning. He described the massacre in sparse, controlled words. How he'd been hunting when he heard the gunfire. How he'd returned to find his family and most of his band already dead or dying. How he'd fought until wounded, then been forced to flee. Only 7 escaped. Others went north to Canada. I stayed. His eyes met hers with unflinching directness. To remember, to survive. Sarah understood then. His isolated existence wasn't purely by choice but a necessity born of being hunted. A man with no people living between worlds. The soldiers, she asked hesitantly. Were they from Fort Collins? Running Wolf nodded once. Under Marshal Thornton? The name had circulated in Copper Creek, spoken with respect bordering on fear. Something flickered in Running Wolf's eyes. A dangerous light quickly controlled. You know this man? Only by reputation. He's the law in Copper Creek now. People say he made the territory safe for settlers. The words sounded hollow as she spoke them, sitting across from living proof of what that safety had cost. Running Wolf added another log to the fire, sparks rising like fireflies before disappearing. Man who builds peace on blood builds nothing lasting. In town, a similar conversation was taking place with far different sentiments. Jackson and Miller, the hunters who had discovered Running Wolf's cabin, sat in the Copper Creek saloon, their tale growing with each retelling. Apache living like a white man, Jackson told the gathered men. And not alone neither. Saw signs of a woman there too. Marshal Thornton, nursing a whiskey in the corner, set down his glass with deliberate slowness. A woman, you say? His voice cut through the murmurs. White woman. Didn't see her direct, Miller admitted, but saw woman's things hanging to dry. Small clothes too. Might be a child. The saloon erupted in speculation, but Thornton had gone very still, memories stirring of an Apache who'd escaped him years ago. An Apache who'd looked at him with eyes promising retribution. Where exactly did you say this cabin was? He asked, reaching for his map. Emma's delighted laugh echoed across the small clearing as her arrow struck the tree trunk. Nowhere near the mark Running Wolf had indicated, but a vast improvement over her previous attempts. The small bow he had crafted for her, scaled perfectly to her 8-year-old frame, had become her prized possession. Better. Running Wolf nodded approvingly. Remember, breathe, then release. Sarah watched from nearby, her own larger bow feeling awkward in hands more accustomed to needlework than weapons. 2 weeks had passed since the hunter's discovery, and Running Wolf had intensified their training in survival skills with quiet urgency. Your turn, he told Sarah, his expression serious. Hunt may become necessary. Sarah positioned herself as he had taught her, feet shoulder-width apart, back straight, elbow high. The bow's tension fought against her muscles as she drew the string back. Steady, Running Wolf moved behind her, adjusting her stance with professional distance. See target. Be target. The arrow flew straighter this time, grazing the crude deer shape he had carved into the tree bark. "You hit it, Mama." Emma clapped enthusiastically. Running Wolf's nod conveyed more meaningful praise than effusive words might have. Again, as they practiced, Sarah marveled at how naturally Emma had taken to Running Wolf's teachings. The girl who had barely spoken for months now peppered him with questions about tracking animals, identifying plants, reading weather signs. Under his patient instruction, she was blossoming into a confident, curious child again. "Why Apache teach girl to hunt?" Sarah asked during a break, curious about his willingness to share such skills with females. Running Wolf seemed surprised by the question. "Women must eat when men die," he answered simply. "Knowledge means life." The pragmatism of his worldview continually challenged Sarah's upbringing. Among her people, protecting women meant sheltering them from harsh realities, a philosophy that had left her desperately unprepared when Thomas died. "In town," Running Wolf said as they collected arrows. "What do they say of woman living with Apache?" The directness of his question caught Sarah off guard. "I don't know what they would say. They would say he took her," Running Wolf replied evenly. "No choice, no will of her own." Sarah understood his implication immediately. If they were discovered, no one would believe she had chosen to stay with an Apache willingly. "Is that why you're teaching us?" she asked. "So we can leave safely when spring comes?" Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or resignation. "Your choice must remain yours, not taken by others' words." That evening, as Sarah prepared dinner from the rabbit Emma had helped track, she contemplated their uncertain future. The quiet rhythms of their days in the cabin had become unexpectedly precious. Emma was healing. The constant fear that had been Sarah's companion since Thomas's death had eased. Yet the world beyond their valley remained hostile to the fragile peace they had found. In Copper Creek, a very different scene unfolded. Marshal Thornton stood before 12 armed men in the courthouse, a map spread across the table before them. "The woman and child were last seen heading south from Miller's Creek," he informed them, marking the location with a pencil. "Jackson and Miller reported an Indian, likely Apache, occupying a cabin in this vicinity." His finger traced a rough circle around the foothills where Running Wolf's valley lay hidden. "What exactly are we doing here, Marshal?" asked Blackwood, a shopkeeper who had reluctantly joined the search party. "Hunting an Indian or rescuing a woman?" "Both," Thornton replied smoothly. "Mrs. Bennett and her daughter are almost certainly being held against their will. Our duty is to bring them safely back to civilization." "And the Apache?" someone else asked. Thornton's expression hardened. "Will answer for any crimes committed." Deputy Collins studied the map with a frown. "That's rough country, Marshal. Deep snow this time of year. Could take weeks to search it properly." "Then we'd best get started," Thornton replied, folding the map decisively. "We leave at first light. Bring provisions for 5 days." He surveyed the men with cold authority. "And ammunition. The Apache won't be taken peacefully." As the men filed out to prepare, Collins lingered behind. "Marshal, if this Apache is who you think he is, after all these years, why risk so many men to find him now?" Thornton's jaw tightened. "Because, Deputy, some debts must be paid in full. Some stories must be properly ended." He touched the long scar that ran from his collarbone to shoulder, a parting gift from the warrior who had escaped the massacre at Eagle Mountain. "This territory has no place for savages who refuse to die with their time." Back in the hidden valley, Emma had fallen asleep beside the fire, her new bow carefully placed nearby. Running Wolf worked silently on more arrows while Sarah mended clothing. Neither spoke of the future that hung uncertain between them, nor of the past that had brought them to this unlikely sanctuary. For now, the present moment, fragile and temporary as winter ice, was enough. The coldest days of winter gripped the valley, forcing them to remain mostly indoors. Running Wolf had taught Sarah and Emma to recognize the dangerous beauty of such days. Crystalline blue skies that promised warmth but delivered deadly cold. The sun's light without its heat. Inside the cabin, life settled into comfortable patterns. Sarah had repurposed one of Running Wolf's old shirts, combining it with deer hide to craft winter boots lined with rabbit fur. She worked on them secretly while he was out hunting, measuring against his old moccasins. "Will they fit?" Emma asked, watching her mother's nimble stitching. "I hope so," Sarah replied. "His old ones are nearly worn through." Emma nodded sagely. "He's teaching us to survive. We should help him survive too." The wisdom in her daughter's words struck Sarah deeply. The mutual care developing between them went beyond mere gratitude for rescue. They had become something like a family, strange and unexpected, formed by necessity but sustained by genuine connection. That evening, when Running Wolf returned with firewood, Sarah presented him with the boots. His surprise was evident as he held them, examining the careful stitching. "You made these?" he asked, turning them over in his hands. Sarah nodded, suddenly uncertain. "Your others were thin at the soles." Running Wolf sat to try them on, and a rare expression of pleasure crossed his face as they fit perfectly. He stood, testing them with a few steps. "Good work," he said simply. "Strong stitches." From Running Wolf this constituted high praise. Emma beamed at her mother, pride shining in her eyes. Later, as a fresh storm howled outside, they gathered close to the fire. The cabin's single room necessitated physical proximity, but Sarah noticed how their initial awkwardness had given way to comfortable familiarity. Emma now regularly sat beside Running Wolf as he carved, asking questions about his techniques. Sarah found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his measured wisdom. Tonight, Emma had fallen asleep between them, her head resting against Running Wolf's arm as he told stories of Apache constellations. The firelight cast warm shadows across her peaceful face. "She trusts you," Sarah observed softly. Running Wolf looked down at the sleeping child, something vulnerable crossing his features before disappearing behind his usual reserve. "Children see true," he replied, gently shifting Emma so her head rested on a folded blanket instead of his arm. No history in their eyes. As he moved away to check the door's security against the storm, Sarah sensed an uncharacteristic tension in his movements. Over the weeks, she had learned to read his subtle expressions, the slight shifts that revealed emotions he rarely voiced. "What troubles you?" she asked when he returned to the fire. Running Wolf remained standing, his face half in shadow. "This cannot last," he finally said, gesturing to encompass the three of them, the cabin, their temporary harmony. "Spring will come." The words struck with painful truth. Their arrangement had always been temporary. Shelter until the weather broke, survival through the harshest season. Yet somewhere along the way, Sarah had stopped thinking of leaving. "Does it have to end?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Running Wolf's gaze met hers directly. "White woman, Apache man." He shook his head slightly. "Territory has no place for such things." "The territory doesn't decide my life," Sarah replied with unexpected firmness. "I've lost enough to other people's rules." "Not simple," Running Wolf warned, though something had shifted in his expression. "Martial searches. Town talks." "Let them talk," Sarah said, the strength in her voice matching the resolve she felt growing inside. "Emma is healing here. I'm learning to survive. Why should we leave that because others wouldn't understand?" Running Wolf knelt beside the fire, adding another log with deliberate care. When he spoke again, his voice carried rare emotion. "When soldiers killed my family, something inside died too." He touched his chest. "Long winter. No spring." His eyes lifted to meet hers. "Until you came." The admission hung between them, fragile and momentous. Sarah felt her breath catch. Before she could respond, a sound outside broke the moment. a branch snapping under weight too heavy to be woodland creatures. Running Wolf was instantly alert, moving silently to the window. Sarah watched as his body tensed. "Men," he whispered, "with torches." Through the swirling snow, faint lights bobbed like malevolent fireflies, approaching from the south. The search party had found them sooner than expected. Running Wolf moved with urgent purpose, retrieving his rifle and pressing Sarah's bow into her hands. "Take Emma through back path," he instructed. "To cave behind waterfall. Remember it." Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "What about you?" Running Wolf's expression was unreadable in the dim light. "I will lead them away. Join you after." Something in his tone made Sarah reach for his arm. "Promise me," she insisted. "Promise you'll come." For a moment, his hand covered hers, warm and strong. "Go now," he said instead of promising. "Keep her safe." Sarah moved swiftly through the hidden passage behind the cabin, carrying a half-asleep Emma. Running Wolf had shown them this escape route weeks ago, a narrow path concealed by dense pines that led to a small cave behind a frozen waterfall. The child stirred against her shoulder, confused by the sudden flight. "Quiet now," Sarah whispered. "Remember our game of silent fox." Emma nodded, instantly alert to the urgency in her mother's voice. She remained silent as they followed the path, illuminated only by starlight filtering through the trees. Behind them, Sarah could hear men's voices approaching the cabin. She quickened her pace, praying Running Wolf would successfully lead them away as promised. The thought of him facing armed men alone twisted her stomach with fear. At the cave, Sarah settled Emma on a bed of pine boughs Running Wolf had prepared for such an emergency. The small space held basic supplies, dried food, water, extra blankets, evidence of his careful planning. "Stay here," Sarah told Emma firmly. "I must go back." "For Running Wolf?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. "Yes." There was no point in lying to the child. Emma clutched her mother's hand. "He saved us, Mama. Now you save him." The simple faith in her daughter's voice strengthened Sarah's resolve. She arranged the blankets around Emma, ensuring she was well protected from the cold. "I'll return soon," she promised, placing her knife within Emma's reach. "Remember what Running Wolf taught you about staying hidden." Retracing her steps toward the cabin, Sarah moved cautiously through the darkness. The voices grew louder, men shouting commands, the crackle of torches. She crept closer, staying within the tree line. The scene that emerged made her blood run cold. Running Wolf stood in the clearing before his cabin, hands raised, surrounded by armed men. At their center stood a tall figure Sarah recognized from descriptions in town. Marshal Wade Thornton, his silver badge gleaming in the torchlight. 10 years is a long hunt," Thornton was saying, his rifle trained on Running Wolf. "But justice has patience." "Justice?" Running Wolf's voice carried clearly in the night air. "Is that what you call murdering women and children?" Thornton's laugh was cold. "Still clinging to that story? Your people raided 3 homesteads. The army's response was authorized and necessary." "Lies," Running Wolf replied evenly. "No raids. You wanted our valley, our hunting grounds." "Where's the woman and child, Indian?" another man demanded. "Mrs. Bennett and her daughter, we know they're here." "Gone," Running Wolf answered. "Weeks ago." Continued south. Sarah watched as Thornton circled Running Wolf like a predator. "Search the cabin," he ordered 2 men. "The rest of you spread out. Check for tracks." As the men dispersed, Thornton stepped closer to Running Wolf. "You should have died with the others at Eagle Mountain," he said, voice low but carrying in the still night air. "Would have been cleaner." "For you," Running Wolf responded. "Not for truth." Sarah's mind raced as she processed their exchange. Eagle Mountain, where Running Wolf had lost his family, and Thornton had been there, had been responsible. The pieces aligned with sickening clarity. One of the men emerged from the cabin holding something that caught the torchlight, a small metal object. "Marshal, you should see this," he called, handing it to Thornton. Even from her hiding place, Sarah recognized Emma's silver locket, left behind in their hasty departure. Thornton opened it, examining the portrait inside. "Thomas Bennett," he read the inscription aloud. "Recently deceased, according to town records," his cold eyes fixed on Running Wolf. "You've been hiding them. The question is why?" Running Wolf remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Sir, found these too," another man announced, emerging with Sarah's mended clothes and Emma's small dress. "Fresh mending. They were here recently." Thornton's jaw tightened. "Widen the search. They can't have gone far in this weather." He turned back to Running Wolf. "And you're coming back to town for questioning." As two men moved to bind Running Wolf's wrists, Sarah noticed something fall from his pocket. Deliberately dropped, she realized. A military badge, tarnished with age. One of the searchers picked it up, studying it with confusion. "Major J. Thompson, 7th Cavalry," he read, showing it to Thornton. "Where'd you get this, Indian?" A flash of recognition crossed Thornton's face, quickly masked. "Probably stole it," he dismissed, but Sarah caught the momentary panic in his eyes. "Found it at Eagle Mountain," Running Wolf said evenly. "On officer who ordered shooting of children." Thornton snatched the badge, shoving it into his pocket. "Enough of your lies. Take him to the horses." As they led Running Wolf away, his eyes scanned the tree line, seeming to look directly at Sarah's hiding place. A nearly imperceptible shake of his head warned her to stay hidden. Sarah clutched a tree trunk for support, mind racing. The badge had clearly disturbed Thornton. It was evidence of something he desperately wanted hidden, perhaps the truth about what really happened at Eagle Mountain. More urgently, she realized Emma had begun coughing again that morning, a worrying rattle returning to her chest. Without Running Wolf's medicine, the child's condition could deteriorate rapidly. Sarah was torn between two impossible choices: risk capture by following them to town, or return to Emma and watch her health decline. As the search party moved deeper into the forest, calling for Mrs. Bennett and her daughter, Sarah made her decision. She would need to find another way to help Running Wolf, one that began with keeping Emma alive. Dawn broke with no sign of the search party's return. Sarah had spent a sleepless night in the cave, watching Emma's condition worsen. The child's forehead burned with fever, her breathing becoming increasingly labored. Without Running Wolf's medicinal herbs, Sarah felt helplessly inadequate. "I'm cold, Mama," Emma whispered, despite the sweat beading on her brow. Sarah wrapped another blanket around her daughter, fear gripping her heart. The previous herbs Running Wolf had prepared were gone, and she lacked the knowledge to identify the correct plants in winter. Emma needed medicine, proper medicine from town. With grim determination, Sarah formulated a desperate plan. She would return to the cabin to gather supplies, then make for Copper Creek herself. The risk was enormous, but Emma's worsening condition left no choice. The cabin appeared undisturbed when Sarah approached cautiously. Inside, signs of the search party's invasion were everywhere. Upturned furniture, scattered belongings, Running Wolf's careful organization destroyed by careless hands. Working quickly, Sarah gathered what they would need: food, warmer clothing, the small amount of money she had kept sewn into her petticoat. As she collected Emma's doll from where it had fallen, her eyes caught a glint beneath Running Wolf's overturned chest. A knife, not his hunting knife, but a smaller one she'd never seen before. The handle was worn cavalry issue, matching the military badge. Sarah tucked it into her boot, sensing its importance. A floorboard creaked behind her. Sarah whirled, grabbing Emma's bow. A poor weapon against guns, but better than nothing. Instead of searchers, she found herself facing Running Wolf, his appearance shocking. Blood matted his hair, and he moved with the stiffness of injured ribs. "How?" She began, lowering the bow. "They are not skilled trackers," he replied, his voice rough. "And ropes are not always tied well." Relief flooded Sarah. "Emma's sick." The fevers returned worse than before. Running Wolf immediately moved to his medicine stores, but his expression darkened, finding them scattered and trampled. "Not enough here. Needs stronger medicine." "I was going to town," Sarah told him. "For the doctor." Running Wolf shook his head. "Doctor would report you. Thornton's men watch roads." He gathered what intact herbs remained. "These will help for now, but need more." "From where?" Sarah asked desperately. Running Wolf's expression became resolute. "Town has apothecary." The implication stunned Sarah. "You can't go to town. They're looking for you." "No choice," he answered simply, already gathering supplies into a small pack. "Emma needs medicine." Sarah caught his arm. "They'll kill you." Running Wolf met her gaze steadily. "Maybe, but child will live." The simple declaration, delivered without drama or self-pity, embodied everything Sarah had come to understand about this man. His capacity for sacrifice had been shaped by loss, yet somehow preserved his humanity rather than destroying it. "I'm coming with you," she insisted. "No." His refusal was gentle but firm. "Emma needs you, and two are easier to spot than one." He showed her which herbs to use in the meantime, demonstrating how to prepare them properly for Emma's fever. His hands moved with practiced efficiency despite his injuries. "If I don't return by tomorrow night," he told her, "take south path to creek. Follow water east 3 days. Apache settlement there. Tell them Running Wolf sent you. They will help." The farewell hung unspoken between them. Sarah found herself unable to voice the fear that this might be the last time she saw him. Instead, she pressed the small cavalry knife into his hand. "I found this. It might help." Running Wolf examined it, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Major Thompson's knife. He is why Thornton fears the badge." "Who was Thompson?" "Commanding officer at Eagle Mountain. Died in Apache ambush, according to Army." Running Wolf's eyes held grim knowledge. "Truth. Thornton killed him when he ordered halt to massacre. Knife proves it." The revelation clarified everything. Thornton's obsession with finding Running Wolf, his panic at seeing the badge, his determination to control the narrative about Eagle Mountain. "Be careful," Sarah whispered, the inadequacy of the words painful. Running Wolf touched her cheek briefly, the first such gesture between them. "Care for little bear. I will return with medicine." Sarah watched him disappear into the forest, moving like a shadow despite his injuries. She returned to the cave with the herbs he had prepared, praying they would be enough until he returned with stronger medicine. Emma was awake when she arrived, her eyes glassy with fever. "Where's Running Wolf?" she asked weakly. Sarah smoothed her daughter's damp hair. "Getting medicine to make you better." "From town?" Emma asked, her perception acute despite her illness. "Yes." Emma's small face creased with worry. "But the bad men are there." "Running Wolf is very clever," Sarah assured her, forcing confidence into her voice. "He'll be careful." As Sarah prepared the herbal tea, her hands shook with the knowledge of what Running Wolf risked. The medicine bottle he sought might cost him his life, yet he had gone without hesitation, for a child not his own, for a woman society would condemn him for protecting. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, covering his tracks as he made his way toward Copper Creek and whatever fate awaited him there. Night had fallen by the time Running Wolf returned to the cave, materializing from the darkness like a spirit. Sarah nearly collapsed with relief at the sight of him, though her joy quickly turned to alarm. New blood stained his clothing, and he moved with the careful precision of a man in considerable pain. "You're hurt?" she whispered, helping him inside. "Not important," he dismissed, producing a small brown bottle from inside his shirt. "Medicine." Emma lay curled on the pine boughs, her breathing shallow and ragged. The herbal tea had helped temporarily, but her fever had risen again as evening approached. Running Wolf knelt beside her, uncorking the bottle. The sharp medicinal smell filled the small space. "From apothecary," he explained, carefully measuring drops into the water Sarah had boiled. "For lung sickness." "How did you get it?" Sarah asked, noting the fresh cuts on his hands. Running Wolf's expression remained neutral. "Better you don't know." He gently lifted Emma's head, helping her drink the mixture. The child grimaced at the bitter taste but swallowed obediently, trusting him implicitly. "Rest now, little bear," he murmured. "Medicine works while you sleep." Only after Emma had drifted off did Running Wolf allow his stoic facade to slip. He leaned heavily against the cave wall, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Town is dangerous," he said quietly. "Thornton has men watching roads, buildings, looking for you. For me. Did anyone see you?" Sarah asked, examining a deep cut on his forearm that needed cleaning. "One man. He won't speak of it." The grim certainty in Running Wolf's voice told Sarah not to press further. As she tended his wounds with strips torn from her petticoat, Running Wolf described what he had learned in town. Thornton had declared Sarah and Emma victims of Apache abduction, promising rewards for information leading to their rescue. Posters bearing crude likenesses of Running Wolf now adorned every public building, describing him as dangerous and desperate. "He claims you raided settlements," Sarah said, anger sharpening her words. "That you're wanted for murder." "Easier than truth," Running Wolf replied. "Men believe what matches their fears." Once his wounds were bandaged, Running Wolf insisted on checking the cabin. "Need supplies, weapons." "You should rest," Sarah protested, but his determination was immovable. They returned to find the cabin undisturbed, though tracks around the perimeter suggested searchers had returned during the day. Inside, Running Wolf went directly to the hearth, removing several stones from the base to reveal a hidden space. Sarah watched in surprise as he extracted a Winchester repeating rifle, a Colt revolver, and several boxes of ammunition, modern weapons kept hidden beneath his more traditional Apache implements. "You've been preparing for this?" she realized. Running Wolf nodded grimly. 10 years waiting. Always knew Thornton would come eventually. He reassembled the weapons with practiced efficiency. "Hoped not with you and Emma here." As he worked, Sarah noticed a torn wanted poster among his supplies, the same one he had described from town. Seeing her own name labeled as a victim, and Running Wolf's face marked for death, made the danger terrifyingly real. "We should leave," she suggested. "Find the Apache settlement you mentioned." Running Wolf considered this, then shook his head. "Emma too weak for long journey. Wait until stronger." "And then?" Sarah asked, the question encompassing all their uncertain future. Before he could answer, Emma's harsh coughing echoed from the cave entrance. They hurried back to find her awake, struggling for breath despite the medicine. Running Wolf immediately prepared another dose, his concern evident despite his controlled expression. "Fever fights strong," he explained, supporting Emma as she drank. "Medicine needs time." In Copper Creek, Marshal Thornton stood before a crowded town hall, his voice carrying to the back rows. "This isn't just about one renegade Apache," he declared, silencing the murmurs. "This is about the safety of every man, woman, and child in this territory." The gathered citizens nodded in agreement, their fears stoked by Thornton's carefully crafted narrative. "Mrs. Bennett and her daughter are victims," he continued, gesturing to a woman's shawl recovered from Running Wolf's cabin. "Taken against their will by a savage who's evaded justice for too long." Deputy Collins stood at the back, his expression troubled. "What if they went willingly, Marshal?" he asked, voicing what some had begun to whisper. The cabin showed no signs of force. Thornton's face darkened. "A woman of decent upbringing would never choose to live with an Indian," he responded coldly. She's either his captive or bewitched by savage tricks. Either way, our duty is clear. He unfolded a map, pointing to the valley where Running Wolf's cabin stood. Tomorrow at dawn, every able-bodied man joins the search. We will find Mrs. Bennet and her child. We will bring them home to civilization. The unspoken fate awaiting Running Wolf hung heavy in the air, requiring no elaboration. Back in the cave, Emma had finally fallen into an uneasy sleep, the medicine slowly taking effect. Sarah sat beside her, while Running Wolf kept watch at the entrance, rifle across his knees. "Will the medicine be enough?" Sarah asked, fear making her voice tremble. Running Wolf's gaze remained fixed on the darkness outside. "If we have time." The quiet words contained the truth they both understood. Time was the one thing Thornton would not allow them. By morning, Emma's fever had broken. Her breathing, though still congested, had lost the frightening rattle. Sarah pressed a cool cloth to her daughter's forehead, relief washing through her at the child's improved color. "The medicine is working," she told Running Wolf, who had maintained his vigil through the night, alternating between watching the forest and checking on Emma's condition. He nodded, the tightness around his eyes easing slightly. "Good. She is strong, like her mother." Emma stirred, her eyes opening with greater clarity than they had shown in days. "I'm hungry," she announced, the most welcome complaint Sarah had ever heard. While Running Wolf prepared a simple broth, Sarah retrieved her journal from their supplies. The leather-bound book had been Thomas's parting gift, intended for recording their new life in the West. Instead, it had become a chronicle of loss, struggle, and unexpected salvation. Sarah wrote with urgent purpose, recording everything: Running Wolf's rescue of them, Thornton's role in the Eagle Mountain massacre, the military badge and knife that could prove his crimes. She detailed their weeks in the cabin, the growing trust and care between them, the truth that contradicted Thornton's narrative of abduction. "What are you writing?" Running Wolf asked, bringing Emma her broth. "The truth," Sarah replied. In case she couldn't finish the sentence. Running Wolf understood. "Good. Truth should survive even if people don't." As Emma ate, showing stronger appetite than she had in days, Running Wolf described his plan. They would wait one more day for Emma to regain strength, then leave at nightfall for the Apache settlement. The route would be difficult, especially in winter, but possible with careful travel. "What about your home?" Sarah asked, looking toward the cabin that had sheltered them. A shadow crossed Running Wolf's face. "Just walls and roof. Can build again elsewhere." The casual acceptance of loss, of starting over with nothing, struck Sarah deeply. Running Wolf had rebuilt his life after unimaginable tragedy, only to lose everything again because he had shown kindness to strangers. "I'm sorry," she said, the inadequate words carrying the weight of her guilt. Running Wolf shook his head. "My choice to help. Your choice to stay." His dark eyes met hers. "No regrets." The simple declaration held more meaning than flowery promises or passionate declarations might have. No regrets, despite the danger, despite the cost. In Running Wolf's economy of words, it was a profound affirmation. Emma had fallen asleep again, her breathing steadier, her small face peaceful. Sarah continued writing in her journal, determined to document everything. If they didn't survive Thornton's pursuit, at least the truth might. "Someone comes," Running Wolf said suddenly, his body tensing as he moved to the cave entrance. Sarah grabbed the revolver he had taught her to use, her heart racing. "Thornton." Running Wolf's expression changed to one of cautious surprise. "No." One man, walking openly. Through the cave entrance, Sarah glimpsed a solitary figure approaching through the trees, a young man in a deputy's coat, moving with deliberate visibility, his hands clearly empty of weapons. Deputy Collins. She recognized him from their brief encounter in Copper Creek months earlier. Running Wolf positioned himself protectively between the approaching man and the cave. "Why would Deputy come alone?" "Let me talk to him," Sarah suggested. He seemed decent, unlike Thornton. After a moment's consideration, Running Wolf nodded. I watch from trees. If trouble, run back to Emma. Sarah approached Collins cautiously, staying within easy retreat distance to the cave. The young deputy stopped when he saw her, relief evident on his face. Mrs. Bennet, he called. Thank God you're alive. Why are you here, deputy? She asked, keeping her voice steady despite her fear. Collins glanced around nervously. To warn you, Thornton's gathered 20 men. They're coming at dawn, and he's not planning on taking the Apache alive. Running Wolf, Sarah corrected firmly. His name is Running Wolf, and he saved my daughter's life. Collins appeared taken aback by her defense. Ma'am, in town they're saying he took you against your will. Lies, Sarah stated flatly. Everything Thornton has said is a lie. He was at Eagle Mountain. He participated in the massacre of women and children, then killed his commanding officer when ordered to stop. The deputy's face paled. That's a serious accusation. We have proof, Sarah replied. Major Thompson's badge and knife. Running Wolf has kept them all these years. Collins processed this information, conflict evident in his expression. Thornton will never let that evidence reach a court. Which is why he's so determined to find us, Sarah concluded. The deputy nodded grimly. You need to be gone by morning. I can delay them somewhat, lead them in the wrong direction initially, but that won't hold for long. Why are you helping us? Sarah asked, studying him intently. Collins looked away, shame crossing his features. I've served with Thornton for 2 years. Seen things that didn't sit right, but this hunting a woman and child, using them to justify killing, it's too much. He reached into his coat, producing a folded paper. Map of patrol routes. Safest path east if you're trying to leave the territory. He hesitated, then added, I never saw you, never gave you this. As the deputy turned to leave, Sarah called after him. The truth is in my journal. If we don't make it. Collins nodded once in understanding before disappearing into the forest. Dawn painted the valley in fragile gold as Running Wolf secured the last of their essential supplies. Emma, wrapped in blankets atop Star, looked stronger but remained worryingly pale. Their plan to leave during the night had been thwarted by a sudden snowstorm that made travel impossible in darkness. We can still make it, Sarah insisted, checking the path Deputy Collins had marked. If we stay in the tree line. The distant sound of horses silenced her. Running Wolf's expression hardened as he scanned the ridge above the valley. Too late, he said quietly. They come from east and south. Sarah followed his gaze to see mounted figures appearing along the ridge, at least 15 men, Thornton's unmistakable silhouette at their center. They had found the cabin and were now surrounding the entire valley. The cave, Running Wolf urged, helping Emma down from the horse. Defendable. Sarah clutched her journal to her chest, the written truth suddenly seeming flimsy protection against rifles and hatred. As they retreated toward the cave, another group of riders appeared to the west, cutting off their escape route. We're surrounded, Sarah realized, fear constricting her throat. Running Wolf assessed their situation with calm precision. Take Emma inside. I will talk to them. Talk? Sarah stared at him incredulously. Thornton didn't come to talk. No choice now. His hand briefly touched hers. Trust me. Inside the cave, Running Wolf retrieved a surprising item from their supplies, a white cloth attached to a slim branch, a flag of truce. Where did you get that? Sarah asked. Made it many moons ago, he replied. Always hoped to use words instead of bullets. Emma watched them with solemn eyes. Are the bad men going to hurt us? Running Wolf knelt before her. Remember how I taught you to be brave? When she nodded, he continued. Today we all must be very brave. He turned to Sarah, his usual reserve giving way to urgent intensity. Whatever happens, stay with Emma. If chance comes to leave, take it. Apache settlement will welcome you. I won't leave you, Sarah protested. Running Wolf touched her cheek. Emma needs her mother. The simple truth brooked no argument. He retrieved Major Thompson's badge and knife, handing them to Sarah. Evidence. Truth. Then he took her journal, tucking it securely inside his shirt. I will carry your words. Before Sarah could respond, Running Wolf retrieved his rifle and stepped outside, the white flag held high in his other hand. Thornton, he called, his voice carrying across the valley. I would speak with you. The riders had drawn closer, forming a loose semicircle around the cave entrance. Marshal Thornton urged his horse forward, rifle resting casually across his saddle. Surrender the woman and child, and we might let you live. Thornton shouted back, though his tone belied the offer. They are not prisoners, Running Wolf replied evenly. Ask them yourself. A murmur ran through the posse at this unexpected response. Sarah, watching from just inside the cave entrance, saw confusion replace certainty on several faces. Mrs. Bennet is clearly not in her right mind after months of captivity, Thornton dismissed. Step aside and let us take her home. Running Wolf remained unmoved. Sarah Bennet, come speak your truth. Sarah hesitated, torn between fear and necessity. Running Wolf's strategy became clear. He was creating witnesses, ensuring Thornton couldn't simply shoot them all and claim justice. Stay here, she told Emma firmly. Don't come out unless I call you. Heart pounding, Sarah stepped into the open, moving to stand beside Running Wolf. Gasps and exclamations came from the assembled men. My name is Sarah Bennet, she called clearly. I am not a captive. This man saved my daughter's life and offered us shelter when we had nowhere else to go. She's been intimidated, Thornton declared dismissively, or bewitched by savage tricks. The only person threatening me is you, Marshal, Sarah countered. Running Wolf has shown my daughter and me nothing but kindness and respect. Thornton's expression darkened. Step away from the Indian, Mrs. Bennet. Now. No. Sarah's refusal rang with quiet certainty. I will not help you murder an innocent man to hide your crimes. Crimes? Thornton laughed harshly. What tales has he filled your head with? Running Wolf spoke then, his voice carrying to all assembled. Eagle Mountain, 1862. Major Thompson ordered you to stop killing women and children. You shot him in the back. A stunned silence fell over the posse. Even the horses seemed to grow still. Lies, Thornton snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. We have the Major's badge, Sarah announced, and his knife. The same knife you claimed was taken by Apaches. Deputy Collins urged his horse forward. Is this true, Marshal? Thornton's face contorted with rage. You'd take the word of a savage and a woman who's shared his bed over a U.S. Marshal? His crude implication brought a flush of anger to Sarah's cheeks, but before she could respond, a small voice called from the cave entrance. My mama is telling the truth. Emma stood in the opening, her small figure defiant despite her weakness. Running Wolf made me better when I was sick. He taught me about animals and stars. He's not a bad man. The child's intervention created a moment of profound uncertainty among the posse. Several men lowered their rifles, uncomfortable with threatening a mother and child. Thornton, seeing his control slipping, made his move. Enough of this farce. He raised his rifle, aiming directly at Running Wolf. Step aside, Mrs. Bennet. No! Sarah moved to shield Running Wolf, but he gently pushed her aside. This is between us, Running Wolf told Thornton, dropping his white flag deliberately. Has been for 10 years. The tension crackled like lightning about to strike. Running Wolf stood tall, unarmed, facing the man who had destroyed his family. Thornton's rifle remained aimed at his chest, finger hovering near the trigger. You survived Eagle Mountain, Thornton said, his voice low enough that only those nearest could hear. You were supposed to die with the others. To hide your shame? Running Wolf asked. Your betrayal? Sarah watched the exchange with mounting horror, aware that most of the posse couldn't hear these damning admissions. She needed to make Thornton's guilt public. Marshal Thornton led the massacre at Eagle Mountain, she called out, her voice carrying across the valley. He killed women and children, then murdered his commanding officer when ordered to stop. Murmurs rippled through the gathered men. Deputy Collins moved his horse closer to Thornton, his expression troubled. Marshal, these are serious accusations, he said. Perhaps we should return to town. Let the judge sort this out. There were no witnesses, Thornton snapped. No proof. Except Major Thompson's badge and knife, Sarah countered. And Running Wolf, who saw everything. Thornton's laugh held no humor. The word of an Apache against a U.S. Marshal? No court would listen. My journal contains everything, Sarah revealed. Every detail Running Wolf shared about that day. Names, times, locations. Enough to raise questions that won't be easily dismissed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Thornton's face. His gaze darted to the journal visible in Running Wolf's shirt. Hand it over, he demanded. Now, so you can destroy it? Running Wolf shook his head. Truth deserves to live. Thornton's patience snapped. Enough. Men, secure the woman and child. The Indian is resisting arrest. Several riders shifted uncomfortably, but none moved to follow the order. The public confrontation had created too many witnesses, too many questions. Marshal, one man called. Seems to me the lady's speaking freely. Don't look like no captive. She's confused. Thornton insisted, desperation entering his voice. Turned against her own kind. Emma had moved to stand beside Sarah, her small hand clutching her mother's skirt. You're the bad man, she said with childish directness. Running Wolf is good. The simple declaration from an innocent child shifted something in the atmosphere. Several men exchanged glances, lowering their rifles further. Thornton saw his authority crumbling. With a cry of rage, he swung his rifle toward Running Wolf and fired. Several things happened at once. Sarah screamed. Emma stumbled backward. And Running Wolf, with reflexes honed by years of survival, dropped to one knee, the bullet passing over his shoulder. Before Thornton could fire again, Deputy Collins kicked his horse forward, knocking the marshal's aim askew. The second shot went wild, echoing harmlessly across the valley. Enough! Collins shouted. This isn't justice. Thornton wheeled on him. You dare interfere with a U.S. Marshal? I'm preventing a murder, Collins replied steadily, placing himself between Thornton and Running Wolf. The standoff hung in perfect balance, until Sarah withdrew Major Thompson's badge from her pocket, holding it high for all to see. This belonged to Thornton's commanding officer, she called, the man he murdered to hide his crimes. Running Wolf has preserved it as evidence for 10 years. The silver badge caught the morning sun, gleaming like truth itself. Several men dismounted, moving closer to see. Thornton, sensing his control disintegrating completely, made a final desperate move. He spurred his horse directly toward Running Wolf, drawing his pistol. No! Sarah rushed forward, but she was too far away. As Thornton closed in, Running Wolf remained motionless, watching his enemy approach with calm acceptance. At the last moment, when the pistol was aimed at his heart, Running Wolf spoke a single word in Apache, a name. The utterance stopped Thornton for a crucial second, recognition flashing across his face. In that moment of hesitation, several men from the posse tackled him from his horse. The marshal hit the ground hard, his pistol discharging harmlessly into the air. Within moments, he was pinned beneath the weight of his own men. This has gone too far, Marshal, one of the older men declared. We came to rescue a woman, not murder an unarmed man. Collins dismounted, approaching Running Wolf cautiously. That journal. It really contains evidence about Eagle Mountain? Running Wolf nodded, withdrawing Sarah's journal from his shirt. Every word true. Sarah Bennett wrote it all. The deputy took the journal respectfully. If what's written here is true, Thornton will face justice. From where he lay restrained on the ground, Thornton spat curses. You're all fools. My word against an Apache and a woman who's forgotten her place. Emma, who had been watching wide-eyed, suddenly approached Thornton. The men restraining him tensed but allowed the child near. She studied him with solemn eyes. My papa taught me that lying is wrong before he died. Running Wolf taught me that being brave means telling the truth even when it's hard. Her clear voice carried surprising authority. You're a liar, and you're not brave at all. The simple condemnation from a child's lips fell like final judgment. Something in Thornton seemed to collapse, his struggles ceasing. Collins turned to the assembled men. We're taking the marshal back to town. Judge Harmon will want to see this evidence. He glanced at Sarah. Mrs. Bennett, you and your daughter are welcome to return under my protection. Sarah moved to Running Wolf's side, taking his hand openly. And Running Wolf? The deputy hesitated, reality intruding on justice. I can't guarantee his safety in town. Then we're staying here, Sarah declared firmly. All of us. Collins surveyed the unprecedented situation. A U.S. Marshal restrained by his own posse, an Apache standing freely beside a white woman who held his hand without shame, and a child who had spoken truth with devastating simplicity. Mrs. Bennett, he said carefully, the town needs to hear your testimony, and he glanced at Running Wolf. His as well if there's to be any justice. There has never been justice for my people in your courts. Running Wolf stated without bitterness, merely acknowledging reality. An older rider dismounted, approaching them. Sarah recognized Mr. Blackwood, the general store owner who had shown her kindness during her brief stay in Copper Creek. What if we guarantee his safety? Blackwood suggested. A written promise, signed by all present. Thornton laughed bitterly from the ground. You think a piece of paper will protect him? The territory will never allow an Apache to testify against a white man, let alone a U.S. Marshal. Perhaps not, Collins acknowledged. But 20 witnesses to your attempted murder might carry some weight. While the men discussed possibilities, Emma tugged at Running Wolf's hand. I don't want to go back to that town, she whispered. They were mean to us before. Running Wolf knelt to her level. Sometimes we must walk into difficult places to make them better. Sarah's mind raced through options, each seeming impossible. Return to Copper Creek, where prejudice against Running Wolf ran deep. Flee to the Apache settlement, becoming permanent outsiders to her own society. Both paths held danger. There's another way, she said suddenly. The territorial governor is touring settlements this month. He's due in Millerville next week, just 3 days' ride from here. Collins nodded thoughtfully. Governor Wilson has final authority over all marshals in the territory. And he wasn't at Eagle Mountain, Sarah continued. Has no reason to protect Thornton. Blackwood stroked his beard. I was headed to Millerville anyway for supplies. Could escort you there myself. Thornton struggled against the men holding him. Wilson won't believe you. He appointed me to clean out the Apache problem. That may be, Running Wolf replied calmly. But even your governor must answer to Washington. A massacre of women and children, the murder of a respected officer. These are not easily dismissed when evidence exists. The journal in Collins' hand suddenly seemed to hold enormous power. Sarah had written everything Running Wolf had told her about Eagle Mountain, names, dates, specific details that could be verified. I propose a compromise, Collins announced. Mrs. Bennett and her daughter will return to town under my protection, along with Marshal Thornton. Running Wolf will remain free but nearby. In 3 days, if arrangements can be made, We all travel to Millerville to present this case to Governor Wilson. Several men nodded approval at this pragmatic solution, but Sarah immediately objected. I won't be separated from Running Wolf, she declared. Not after everything that's happened. Running Wolf touched her arm gently. 3 days is not long. Emma needs proper rest before traveling again. And town has real doctor, Blackwood added. Child still looks peaked to me. Sarah felt torn between concern for Emma's health and fear for Running Wolf's safety. What guarantee do I have that another posse won't come after him while we're separated? My word, Collins said firmly. And I'll leave 3 men I trust to ensure no one approaches this valley. Running Wolf studied the young deputy, measuring his sincerity. I believe him, he finally said to Sarah. He has honor. The decision crystallized in Sarah's mind. 3 days, she agreed. Then we all go to Millerville together. As arrangements were made, Thornton was secured on his horse, hands bound to the saddle horn. Most of the posse would escort him back to town, while 3 men would remain behind as Collins had promised. Before parting, Sarah embraced Running Wolf openly, regardless of watching eyes. Be careful, she whispered. You also, he replied softly. Town will not welcome your defense of me. Emma hugged him fiercely around the legs. I'll tell everyone you're a hero, she promised. Running Wolf smiled, a rare, full expression that transformed his usually stoic features. Little Bear is already braver than any warrior I know. As they prepared to leave, Collins approached Running Wolf with unexpected formality. 10 years ago, a great injustice was done to your people, he said. I can't undo that, but I give you my word, your story will be heard. Running Wolf accepted this with a dignified nod. Not just my story, the story of all who died at Eagle Mountain. The posse departed with their unlikely arrangements, a disgraced marshal in custody, a determined woman and child with newfound allies, and an Apache warrior standing freely before the cabin he had built between 2 worlds. Sarah looked back as they rode away, memorizing the image of Running Wolf watching them depart. Tall and straight against the morning sky, no longer hiding, no longer hunted. For the first time since Thomas's death, her heart felt light with something she had almost forgotten: hope.